To gain access to the elements on our page, the easiest way is something that we've looked at before. So I can do const, and then I'm going to set up my first item, computer, is going to be equal to document.query selector, and then we specify what selector, and I want to access the computer. So that gives me access to it. We've used query selector before. An additional way that we can gain access to something, so with this one, I'm going to grab the human, and it still is the same as document, but instead of query selector, we can use get element by ID. And now we can notice I don't need the hashtag because we're specifying we're getting it by an ID, so we just want the name of that ID. So the ID on my input field is the human. So the computer is going to be this paragraph that we'll keep changing the text on. The human is going to be the input field where people will provide text. But I don't have to use the hashtag here if I'm using get element by ID. Now a third way we can gain access to things is get elements, and notice it's elements plural, by tag name. And then we say what tag we're trying to get, and the tags are then accessed as array elements. So what that means is if I had multiple elements on my page of this kind of tag, they're in an array. An array is a list of items, and that list of items we reference by their position in the array, and we start counting at 0. So I want to say in my elements array of elements of type button, I want to get the first one. Now in this particular project, we only have one button, but if I did have a second button, like, whoop, missed. Like that, if I wanted to access that button, it would be at position 1 in my button array. Because if I asked the computer, if I grabbed all the elements by tag name button and didn't specify which one, it would give me an array of which within that array, this button is the first one, this button is the second one, but this one is referenced at position 0 because computers like to start counting from 0. So to get my button working, we need to use, there we go, I was waiting for my code completion to play nice with me. Add event listener. The event we're listening for is going to be a click, and then we'll have click handler function. Now, we need to define what that function is. Otherwise, if I click the thing right now, I think it's going to give me an error message. And right now, if I look, I save, and it's giving me an error message that it says click handler is not defined. So the next order of business I may want to do is to define click handler like that, and with that we could just simply do something. I'll just say computer dot we'll change its inner HTML equal to, I don't want to put that in quotes. We'll just change it to whatever text that was typed in the form field. So now if we save that, set this up at one point, and I said I don't want my button to show up because I wanted it just to be text. So it's like I was thinking about old style computer terminal where you just are typing away, and I made my button go away. So I said no button. Now if I look back here, we can see there's the button I can click, and now we're seeing that we get some text showing up. Now we have enter and exit there. Now I'm not really a fan of the button. We could leave the button there. I'm going to go back and say display none. Instead, what I want to do is set it up so that instead of having to click the button, I can just hit the return or enter key on the keyboard. To get my whole project listening for it, I tell the window to add event listener. And then this time is going to be an event of key down. And I will call my key down handler function.
What's the difference between you?
Working in JavaScript the same way that JavaScript is relatively carefree and happy with white space, JavaScript also in most instances does not care whether you use single or double quotes. So in the button add event listener, I use single quotes. In the window add event listener, I use double quotes. That was on purpose to determine if people are paying attention to the subtle distinction there, which is JavaScript doesn't care. The window listens for the key down event. The window is the only thing that cares about it. It's not individual elements. It's the window that wants to know. Now the window is going to then call the key down handler function. So then we'll put that in. And now this function also needs to bring in an it has a parameter because when I press a key, the computer knows that a key was pressed, and that generates a key code. That key code is a special magic thing so that we can then identify what key was pressed on our computers. So I can simply say if event key code is equal to a particular number, then that tells me which key was pressed. And if that happens, then we're going to do something. Now that key code that we're looking for is the ASCII or ASCII character codes that are associated with all the keys on the keyboard. So with the key code set to 13, that's the key command for the return key on the keyboard. If we want to be inclusive and also grab the enter key off the numeric keypad, we can extend this with an OR statement, or if the key code is equal to 10, which is the enter keyboard. So we can use one or the other. Now, it's possible to look for all the keys as people are typing in, and then you can do different things based on what keys that people press on their keyboard and make all kinds of magical things happen inside your programs. Notice is if I click the button, I want to do something, and if I press return or enter on my keyboard, I want to do something. So really, since they're both supposed to be kind of set up to do the same thing, I would prefer not to have to go like computer.inner HTML equals human.value like this, and do the same thing twice, because now if I add to this one, I have to add up to the other one, and pretty soon I have the same chunk of code repeating, and that's going to be a waste of time. A common thing when writing code is to try and write dry, D-R-Y, do not repeat yourself. Or don't repeat yourself, D-R-Y. So don't repeat yourself. So right now I've just repeated myself. And the solution to that is to have a function. I'm going to call mine play game. And this is where I want to do something for real. And then I will just call play game. From each of my methods. So now play game can become my actual program where I'm going to take a look at what the user has inputted. Based on what the user has said, I'm going to provide a response. Have to analyze a string. So if I look in this example here where I have phrase and phrase LC, where phrase has been converted to lowercase. So if phrase lowercase index of the letters J, O, and H is not equal to -1, it's going to log out yep. Otherwise, it will log out nope. So if I run this particular project, I'm going to find out whether that's true or not, because index of returns the point in which it encounters those letters. If it does not find that letter or letters that you're asking it to look for, it returns -1. Otherwise, it returns the position that that letter starts. So JOH would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if I said, what is phrase LC index of JOH? It would give me a value of 12. But if it can't find those letters, it gives me a value of -1. So we say, well, if -1 doesn't exist, then I want you to do something, because that means you found it. And that would why we log out yup. Looking at having a couple answers here and trying to explore how we can work with it, we can say if human dot value actually, it's going to be easier to convert this to a variable first and then compare that variable, because we need to knock it down to lowercase first. So we can even say let human message be equal to human the value of human dot to lowercase, and that's a method, so we put a couple parentheses after it. So we let the human message be equal to whatever they provided. Now that's going to be easier to say human message. So, and then do index of, and then whatever we're looking for. In this case, we'll first look for tired. And with that, say not equal to -1. What? So jumping over to the page. I need to save it first. Now go back over to my page. And we can see now it gave me a message. Now what it hasn't done, it hasn't cleared out my text field. And I probably want to do that so it's ready for me to now type in a new thing. Also notice I played around with the capitalization to see how that worked. I can do all lowercase. That works. But now no matter what I do, it's not going to change because it changed to that text and there's nothing to make the computer change its message unless I refresh and restart the whole page. We set the value of human back to empty after we've entered something in. Let's find out what happens. How am I today? If I type in bad, nothing happened, but it did clear it, but it didn't change the computer's response. But now if I type in tired, we can see it changed it and it now cleared the field, so it's ready for me to go. So the next thing is to start thinking through how we can work with this and pull in some other values. And as we work this, we're going to progressively start coming up with a better structure for working with the code. But right now, let's pull in some of the other examples that we were looking for else. Now, what I'm going to do is just do some copy pasting to get working with this a little bit faster. So just copy pasting some of the text in. So the first was tired. After tired, sleepy. And after sleepy, we have exhausted, which is, I think we have a pattern going on here. Let's see, after sleepy, you must know Snow White. And then after exhausted, you should get a bite to eat. And if they've entered something that we don't understand, at this point, we can now round it out and say, I do not like you. So what we're doing here is starting to create a few options and possibilities for the computer where it's analyzing some of the answers that are provided, and then it's going to go through and do it. So if we say sleepy, now if I were to say I am tired, it already knew that tired was part of that. So when we're looking for with words with index of, it doesn't have to be the very first letters, as long as those letters exist in what we are providing as an answer. So if I were to say something where it says, if I'd say sleepy head, it knows that sleepy is part of that. So if I have a few letters, tired, and a few more letters, it knows tired exists in that. So it's not looking for grammatically correct. It's not looking for words. It's looking for groups of letters. So this is not a foolproof chatbot that you need to ask very specific questions where you know you're going to get limited answers. My list of snarky responses. I'll say let my random responses be equal to, and now it's going to be an array with a square bracket. Now as I define this, I'm going to hit return so I can put them on their own lines just to make it easier. I hate you. Oh, the wrong key there. Now after each item you do a comma. You are my best friend. Maybe we should stop talking. And your list of snarky responses can go on and on and on until you have decided, you know, how your computer attitude is
Do we have to use brackets instead of curly brackets?
The sky is blue. Now, as you do your list of responses, each one with a comma after the last one, make sure you don't put a comma after that, otherwise it will break your code. It's really common when you are doing something and you break it on multiple lines like this for ease of readability, is that you do a bunch of copy pasting and then you realize you end up with a bonus comma after the last item because you just copy paste, change a few things around, and then that final comma will wreck it. So it's item, comma, item, comma, item, comma, item. And then we have the curly braces that define this grouping. Array of responses. I need to go back and look at random. How do we access random? And we can see that we can create a random number. We can make that random number tied to how many items are in it. So in this case, I had a list of names, and then I made a random number based on those names. And then I was able to return one of the names from my array using that random number to access that item in the array. Instead of having the computer immediately say, I do not like you, what we want to do is generate a random number. So I can say constant random number is going to be equal to math.floor math.random. Now, math.random gives us a value between 0 and 1. We will take that value and multiply that value by the number of items that are in my random responses array. Math.floor rounds down. Math.random gives me a random value 0 to 1, times that or multiply that by however many items are in my random responses. So if I add more responses later, this number will update itself with it. Currently, random responses length is 4. Length is how many items are contained in that array. So that's 4 times some value between 0 and 1, up to but not including 1. So if it's 0.5 times 4 would give me 2. But if it was 0.5, 4, 3, 2, 6, 8, 9, 9, 12, it gives me a 16 value number. So 16 points after the decimal, random number. I round that down, so then I will end up with whole numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, we could keep running this and find out how it works. We could just log that out just for kicks. Right now, log out random number, save this, jump over to here, and now if I just put in anything, 0, 3, 0, 0, 2, 3, so we'll see that we're getting 0, 1, 2, and 3 as our possible values. Those numbers are important because in random responses, this is at position 0, this is at position 1, this is position 2, this is position 3. So this tells me my random number is generating the range of values that I want. It's a good idea when you are writing your code is to log things out to the console to find out what are the values instead of just trusting that what you've done is correct, and prove to yourself if it's correct before you try and implement it in the rest of your code. Use the console. Use log statements to dump junk into the console to verify it's giving you what you want, so then when you try and use it, you can make something happen. So instead now, I can say I want to set the computer's inner HTML equal to random responses, square brackets, random, that random number. So I'm going to grab out of my random responses array. I use the square brackets to access an item in that array, and it's going to be this, whatever one is tied to that random number. So if I save that and jump over into my project, I will see that every time I hit enter, it now is going to keep cycling through. So it works. So to take care of the problem where we keep getting the same answer in a row, what we're going to do is use splice so that we're able to get rid of an element out of our array as we use it. And then after we have got rid of that, once our array has no more elements in it, then we're going to go use the location assigned to send ourselves off to a different screen. Because then that's a nice way of working with it. So this requires a little bit of thinking of the process and sequence as we're going to go through it. To take care of the problem using splice, what we need to do is we need to then figure out how we're going to go about doing this. The first thing is to find out if random response's length is greater than 0, meaning there are still some responses in that array. Then we want to show the random answer. But if the other option is if it's not greater than 0, meaning there aren't any more, then we want to go someplace else. I'm going to show the random answer. That's going to be the stuff we had before, so we'll go back and move that code around first, and then we'll figure out how to go somewhere else, and then we're going to go look at this fun GIF of a dog on what appears to be a jet ski. So we can go grab our random number. We can go change the HTML of the computer. Then what we need to do is in random responses, we need to splice it. Now splicing takes two values. The thing we want to get rid of, its position in the array. So splicing deals in numbers. We don't list the item itself, we list its position. Well, we know its position because its position is that random number that we worked with. And then we tell the computer how many items we want to remove from the array. In this case, we want to just move 1. 1 is the item that, so we're getting rid of that item from our array. So what this means is we will not see our answers repeat. Instead, if we try to look up the computer or have the computer do an answer and there aren't any more random answers, then at that point we are going to use the method of location dot assign. And what that allows us to do is to go to a new place. Now we could use location replace, but that's kind of bad form, because when we use location replace, that clears the history as well, so then that's just really not an ideal way of working. So I need to now, with assign, put the URL. So I have this URL that I obtained earlier, and I will put that into my assign statement. So if there are no more answers when I hit return, it's just going to immediately jump to this new location. It's not going to show us any more text. It's not going to do anything else. It's going to just bail.